Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I wish to lend my voice and stand resolutely with my colleagues of the parliamentary opposition as we interrogate Budget 2023 presented by the Senior Minister with responsibility for finance within the Office of the President, Dr. Ashley Singh. This budget, of course, Mr. Speaker, is themed improving lives today, building prosperity for tomorrow. The honourable member says that this budget is supposed to be capturing the essence of simultaneous attention being paid to both the immediate issues and irritants of the day, as well as the longer-term investments needed to be secured, the well-being of all Guyanese people well into the future. Who knew, Mr. Speaker, that the honourable member had such jokes? Who knew? By the time you get to the end of the budget, Mr. Speaker, you understand why Dr. Singh, the honourable member, was so heavily medicated during the initial presentation 2 Mondays ago. The average Guyanese, however, is not so lucky with fast access to drugs. As any visit to a health centre would inform you, Mr. Speaker, 3 years on, 4 budgets later, the shelves at the health centres are bare. Mr. Speaker, I disagree with the tenor of Budget 2023. I disagree with the timbre of Budget 2023. I disagree with the economic underpinnings and the outlook of Budget 2023. I definitely disagree with the political philosophy of Budget 2023, and I most definitely Budget 2023 is a contradiction. Budget 2023. It is a big projects budget. But we have no issue there with big projects. But the PPP's history of big projects is a sordid one. Forgive me if we're not backflipping on this side over big projects. It is the accountant par excellence, Alan Gulceran, who was taking us through the failed projects we've had as a nation. Incidentally, all of them belong to the PPP. Failed project, Sherod International Airport, $138 million US. Skeldon Sugar Factory, a big failed project. Started out at $150 million US, ran up to $200 million US. This is Alan Gulceran writing for Stabrook News. The one laptop per family. Another big failed project, according to the learned accountant, Mr. Speaker. And then we come to the fiber optic cable. And he didn't only tell us it was a failed project, he told us why. He said nothing was achieved, but the country saddled with debt. Stabrook News, April 19, 2022. Alan Gulceran said that these projects failed completely to deliver in terms of their objectives, their outputs, their outcomes and impacts, thereby encumbering Guyana with public debt to the tune of $115 million US, with little or nothing to show of the expenditure incurred. So, Mr. Speaker, we apologize if we're not backflipping on this side, the big projects laid out in this Budget 2022. Budget 2023, thank you. It is not a good budget, Mr. Speaker. One commentator stated that it is not an economist's budget, it is an accountant's budget. And after hearing some of my honorable colleagues on the other side, Mr. Speaker, you get the impression it's not only the parliament, you get the impression it's the only parliamentary opposition that has issues with an otherwise brilliant budget, as stated by the honorable member, Vindhya Prasad. But the independent commentator, Mr. Speaker, posited, notwithstanding, and I quote, the budget is a one-year program of the government. It should be informed by a larger vision of the government. It should be anchored in the government's national development strategy and at least a medium-term fiscal plan. Regrettably, the commentator says, the government does not have a national development strategy in which to tether budget 2023. Further contending, the commentator says, the International Monetary Fund has emphasized the importance of such a framework, the fiscal policy, to anchor such a budget. It is the 2022 Article 4 of that consultation report of the IMF, in which the IMF had recommended that budgets are set within a medium-term macroeconomic framework. And further, it was the Inter-American Development Bank which offered similar advice, Mr. Speaker. Its June 2018 policy brief had underscored that the magnitude of the country's oil revenues not be understated, and that the work should commence on a rule-based fiscal framework. I think what the commentator really meant is that budget 2023, Mr. Speaker, has no soul. The budget simply has no soul. Mr. Speaker, I did manage to ask an accountant his own impression of the commentator's refrain. It is not an accountant's budget. It is not an economist's budget, but rather an accountant's budget. And that accountant says that is an insult to accountants everywhere. Mr. Speaker, the great poet William Butler Yeats wrote in his epic ballad, The Second Coming, much like this dispensation of the People's Progressive Party. The words ring true today as they ever were. Things fall apart that the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loose upon the world. Mr. Speaker, these words are prophetic, and as I said, as relevant as they ever were. Things fall apart because the center cannot hold. Things fall apart that the center cannot hold. In Guyana 2023, Mr. Speaker, things fall apart because the center just cannot hold. And mere anarchy is loosed upon our world. The Honorable Accountant is finding out the hard way that throwing money at problems don't mean you're solving them. And in 2020, we threw $329 billion at the problems we have. And then we mopped up with a $17.4 billion supplementary. Those were thrown at some of the problems we have as a nation. And yet, Mr. Speaker, things are still falling apart because the center just cannot hold. In 2021, we threw $383.1 billion at some of our issues, and then a supplemental of $21.3 billion and another of $26 billion, respectively. And those problems yet persist, Mr. Speaker, because things are still falling apart. Why? The center just cannot hold. 2022, $552.9 billion. And then we top that up with a $44.7 billion supplemental budget, followed by another $47.3 billion. And here we are, things falling apart. Are they worse in 2023? By this time, you would think the government will understand throwing money alone at the problems will not fix them, will not solve them, Mr. Speaker. You all remember Dr. Ashley Singh, noting how persistent these issues are, that bedeviled him, resorts to a new categorization of these troubles. Irritants of the day, he says, because he started with them in 2020, and yet they persist. And now we categorize them as irritants of the day. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, we have a similar categorization for the government. Irritants of the day. The Honorable Dr. Ashley Singh does not realize that things fall apart because the center cannot hold. And in Guyana, Mr. Speaker, the center is not holding. Mr. Speaker, the center is not holding. It is rotten. And that is why it is not holding. It is wicked, it is stink, and it's dirty. That's why it's not holding. Take housing, for instance. And this issue of squatting. Take housing, and this issue of squatting, Mr. Speaker. If our brothers and sisters in charity can go from squatters on that land to legal landowners, then our brothers and sisters at Caneview Mucker residents, the Caneview Mucker residents can go from squatters to landowner of that very same land, but the center in Guyana in 2023 is not holding. If Pigeon Island squatters can go from ownership, from squatting to owners and ownership of their land, then the success squatters, Mr. Speaker, must have the same opportunities. We have different strokes for different folks in Guyana because the center, Mr. Speaker, is not holding. And if the squatters of Iflot Sideline Dam and Tushen Railway Embankment can receive their land titles, and the squatters of Amelia's Ward have their houses torn down, how can we say the center is holding? After 25 years of the PPP in housing, it's about time for a coherent policy on housing, or things will keep falling apart and the center will definitely not hold. Mr. Speaker, let me detain you here for a short while on the Honorable Dr. Ashley's phrase, irritants of the day. 4 budgets later, 3 years in, the Honorable Member Dr. Ashley Singh said this means ensuring decent quality community infrastructure, including community roads, drainage and irrigation structures, Mr. Speaker. We have had enough of these here today, gone tomorrow roads. That 100 million Burma Road was here one day, gone the next. They're still battling to understand Carifesta Avenue. It was there one day, gone the next. Silvertongue Road in Linden was there one day, gone the next. Hararuni Access Road was there one day, gone the next, Mr. Speaker. It's enough. And it's time we stop giving these contracts to friends, family, and favorites. Producing these here today, gone tomorrow roads, Mr. Speaker. And let us bring back qualified contractors and get on with the job of building this nation. Irritants of the day, Mr. Speaker. Crime is all about overtaking us. 4 biggest budgets later. Criminal elements operate with impunity. Where is the crime prevention?
Okay, Honorable Member, you've been testing my patience. You used the word wicked, and I didn't want to correct the young chief whip for the opposition when he said it was not there. And then there are words, you get back your time. There are words which, if in the speaker's opinion, right? Yesterday, I don't know if you were here, I spoke about, I consider imputing the word giving contracts. That was the second one. And you just used criminal. So, I now ask that those words be struck and you continue to observe the parliamentary practice. You went back again. If I say you can't use it, you can't even try to explain. You don't use it.
I withdraw the truth, Mr. Speaker. I withdraw the truth. Where's the crime prevention plan, Mr. Speaker, that was promised in the extract of the People's Progressive Party manifesto, 4 biggest budgets later? Al-Madini supermarket, right in Kitty, around the corner from where we are, was robbed twice last week. Where's the crime prevention plan? The Honorable Minister Ben seemed asleep at the wheels. Where is the crime prevention plan? Choke and rob bandits have returned unchecked, pouncing any time of the day, anywhere on unsuspecting victims, Mr. Speaker. And of course, Guyana seemed to be characterized by the wild, wild west, people being shot under dubious circumstances by police. Cecil Sampat, Sherwin Philly, Peter Headley, or in Boston are just a few of the names that come to mind. And then it seems as though whenever this administration comes back into power, it seems cocaine comes back. September 5th, 2020, 2 planes found with cocaine, Region 7, November 5th, 2020, Belgian police seized 11.5 tons of cocaine, a shipment from Guyana. May 21st, 2021, a foreign aircraft with over 100 pounds of cocaine found in Region 6, East Berbice Quarantine. You had also in July 15, 2021, a burnt out illegal plane found in the Trail of Bisharuni, also suspected to be involved in narcotics. You had August 14, 2021, Caribbean Airlines plane intercepted at Miami with cocaine emanating from Guyana. November 4, 2021, 2 foreign men, a Colombian and a Venezuelan, nabbed with a small plane with cocaine. December 1, 2021, the law enforcement in the Netherlands intercepted more than 1,100 pounds of cocaine in a shipment that emanated from Guyana. January 20th, 2022, Guyana flagged 3 containers, but this one's different now. Arms and ammunition to the tune of $5 million in Senegal, in Dakar, Senegal, emanating again from Guyana. Mr. Speaker, one would get the impression the national flag carrier is cocaine.
Honorable Member, January 26, 2023 at 2:32:08, you need an extension.
Thank you, Comrade Speaker. I do move if the honourable member can be given 10 minutes to conclude his presentation. But it's your discretion, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chief Whip. Honorable Member, Mr. Duncan, you have 5 minutes to conclude.
Thank you, gracious Speaker. People are being gunned down in the streets of the wild, wild West Guyana with impunity. Delon Josiah, just recently, Anthony Charles, just recently in Durban Street, Rondell Haynes, Peter Gonzalez, we have Delron McKenzie, Devane McLennan, Oldingo Anthony Haywood, Jaleel Lowe, Ricardo Fagundes, Sion Landon, Renal Omar Smith, Euclid De Silva, Daniel Fraser, and Shanika Ford are just a few of the names since August 2nd, 2020, who have been gunned down. If the Honorable Minister Robeson Ben is not up to the task, let us send him off to spend some time with his family. But this posture of strategic patience with criminal elements cannot continue, Mr. Speaker.
I'll have to do like a school teacher. Do you see where you went wrong? I actually withdraw the word. Thank you. Go ahead, Honorable Member.
But let us arrest crime now and protect our citizens. Things are falling apart, Mr. Speaker, and the center just cannot hold. Mr. Speaker, things fall apart. As I said, the center is not holding. Mr. Speaker, we learned very early as students at law the Latin phrase, audi alteram partem. This translates into hear the other side. It takes a certain kind of maturity to meaningfully hear the other side. We don't have to agree on all points. I want to believe that we all generally want the development of this country, Mr. Speaker. But we disagree on how we can get there. In 2020, Honorable Member Dr. Ashley Singh had a plan for prosperity, protecting our people in a COVID-19 environment. 4 biggest budgets later, COVID needs $2 billion now. How is that working out for us? Maybe we should listen to the other side, Mr. Speaker. In 2021, economic dynamism and resilience was the aim. Well, 8% inflation has now eaten that up, folks, from 0.9 in 2020, decimating those utopian hopes. In 2022, Mr. Speaker, the intent was steadfast against all challenges, resolute in building one Guyana. Today, the nation stands more divided than ever. Maybe we should listen to the other side. President Barack Obama, in his first inaugural speech in 2009, speaking to an equally divided nation, said, those who cling to power through corruption and deceit and the silencing of dissent.
Honorable Member, I'm not allowing the use of that word, and I ask that you continue to refrain from introducing words that we don't use in this House.
President Barack Obama, Mr. Speaker, in his first inaugural speech in 2009, speaking to an equally divided nation, said to those who cling to power through beep, beep, and deceit and silencing of dissent, know that you're on the wrong side of history, but that we will extend a hand if you are willing to unclench your fist, Mr. Speaker. That unclenched fist could begin to open, Mr. Speaker, by simply beginning to listen to the other side. And not just the parliamentary opposition, as I conclude, Mr. Speaker. Sabbath News in its editorial of January 23, 2023 notes that with the bountiful good news, there will inevitably be cautionary tales about the way forward. The oil bonanza continue to show early features of both the Dutch disease and the resource curse, Mr. Speaker. The man and woman in the street, the editorial says, continue to be at the mercy of the market forces that have pumped up the cost of living, particularly since oil production began. Increased demand in the food sector associated with the oil and gas industry have driven up prices for basic items, and nothing that the government has done since its term began has had a lasting effect on easing this burden. In the 10th installment of the Starbuck News Cost of Living series of that day, Mr. Speaker, of that day, the newspaper reports, ordinary folks have set out in excruciating details how difficult it has become to make ends meet. And finally, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude.
Well, beep, beep, your time is up, but I'll allow you to conclude.
Thank you very much, gracious Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Rama McCray analysis, focus on budget, National Budget 2023 is required reading, at least for anyone desirous of hearing the other side. The publication states, Mr. Speaker, despite the PPPC's manifesto commitment for better contract administration and renegotiation, the government is now so accommodating of the oil companies that the country's already weak laws are completely ineffective. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the editorial, the analysis says, indeed, the failure to increase the 2023 budgetary allocation for the Environmental Protection Agency, its slothfulness in updating the 1986 laws or establishing an independent petroleum commission seems motivated by a desire for control and secrecy in government. Control and secrecy in government. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the publication states, one feature of this administration has been its increasing reliance on cash grants as a poverty cushioning measure, but the government's stubborn refusal to raise the national minimum wage. It seems that for some long time into the future, cash grants will be the principal tool of poverty reduction. That's the world's fastest growing economy. That the world's fastest growing economy, Mr. Speaker, is sustained by one of the lowest minimum wage in the world, sits uncomfortably with each other, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, things are falling apart in this country because the center just cannot hold. Thank you very much.